Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to finally give my review for Smolder, our newest champion, because he's been out for a few days now and I wanted to give my first few thoughts on our newest champion. I think Smolder is a super fun character, and as our first real dragon champion, more on that in a bit, he occupies a very good niche in the game, especially as regards to his design. That said, he has a lot of play issues, which I don't know are able to be fixed, so let's talk about that in a bit as well. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the pros of Smolder, however. First up, Smolder is simple to play. True to Riot's word, Smolder is remarkably easy to just pick up, press buttons on, and have a good time. You realistically have one cooldown that you're using all the time, which is your Q, and you can therefore focus more on how best to use your other abilities. W and E are less relevant for damage purposes, so you get to spend a lot more time thinking about your positioning and your DPS, rather than on the optimal rotation of all of your abilities. That said, Smolder's abilities don't have any true combos, but they do combo together in a satisfying manner. Being able to do something like landing a W on a distant champion, then channel your R, then fly forward with your E, you get the healing from your R as it passes through you, then it hits the enemy champion for another slow and a bunch of damage, then you're in range to start DPSing with your Q. Like, there's a lot of kind of fun things that Smolder can do with his abilities that aren't true combos, but they still play together nicely, as opposed to some other champions like Senna, where there are no inherent combos in how that champion plays at all. I think Smolder's Q is an exceptionally powerful ability despite its simplicity as well. He spends most of his time pressing Q, and it's nice that it's naturally his strongest basic ability. Both of the area of effect upgrades dramatically improve its usability and feel, and getting to the final upgrade gives Smolder some very scary hyper carry potential. Being able to just say, I have Elder Buff forever for free, makes Smolder a very spooky champion. Now, I initially expected the final Q upgrade to be sort of in magical Christmas land, like you'll get this in, 1% of your games, but it'll never come up besides that. But in all but one of the games I've seen Smolder in, he's managed to reach that final Q upgrade. Usually it seems to time out at about the 30 to 35 minute mark. This then means that Smolder's late game potential is all but guaranteed. You are always going to be hitting this mark in most games, and as a result, Smolder is a reliable source of damage for your team. Speaking of reliability, the Q is targeted. I somehow missed this in his initial reveal. I just assumed it was a skill shot, but it is targeted, which means that you can count on its damage every single time you press the button. It also applies on hit effects, so there are some fun things you can do. It's sort of a enhanced auto attack, so to speak, which does make it a very reliable source of Smolder's kit. Smolder's R, however, is another powerful team-fighting cooldown. The range, I think, is the biggest thing on this button. You can really surprise people by just how far away it comes from, and just how much damage it does is quite surprising, I think, overall. The heal as well is a nice touch on this ability, meaning Smolder can use it in a defensive circumstance as well to get a little bit of health back while he's in the middle of a hectic scenario. Smolder's E is also exceptionally powerful with regards to its mobility. The ability to reposition yourself in mid-flight gives him some fun use cases that other champions lack, right? Like if Ezreal E's over a wall, he's done, right? He can't get back over without using something like Flash. Smolder, meanwhile, can fly over the wall to check Drake or Baron before flying back over it with the same cooldown. You can also change direction midair to avoid an incoming skill shot, or reposition after going at a line of sight to prevent enemy champions from knowing which way you went. Like, there are a lot of fun things that I think this ability does for Smolder. It's a very powerful cooldown overall. Smolder is also our first actual dragon champion. Obviously, we've had draconic champions in League of Legends before now, but they haven't exactly been true dragons. Siobhan is obviously a half dragon and plays in a human form a lot of the time, and Aurelion Sol is really more of a cosmic being or space mage more than a dragon. He has a few more dragon-y abilities in his kit following his CGU, but I still feel like Aurelion Sol doesn't really scratch that dragon itch in the same way that Smolder does. What does Smolder do? He flies, he breathes fire, he looks like a dragon, right? So I feel like Smolder occupies that niche a little bit better than our other dragon champions, which is something I think is needed in League of Legends, as lots of people have said loud and clear, we want more dragons in League. However, that's about all the good I can say for Smolder. There are a lot of things that I don't think he does particularly well. Mostly, this is just wonky design with regards to how Smolder was put together. Smolder's Q applying on hit effects immediately makes him look like an Ezreal-type character, right? Where you build Manamune and Essence Reaver, and you take a more ability-heavy, Spellslinger-type approach, and this seems to be how Riot intended for him to be built as well, as those are the items that are being recommended to me in the shop. Now, obviously, maybe that's based on other player data, but I'm assuming that those were pre-programmed by Riot. However, Smolder's Q is the only ability that really synergizes from this build. His W and his E have such miserable damage scalings that their use case for damage is practically non-existent. Like, they literally don't do any damage, you guys. Smolder's passive theoretically makes them stronger, but the damage scalings are so weak as to be irrelevant. I think it's something like 55% on W of his Dragon Practice stacks, and like 20% on his E, which means that they just don't scale well at all with the passive that Riot gave him specifically to say your abilities do more damage over time, and they don't even scale 100%, which means I'm like, so how did you design this champion then that his passive doesn't scale perfectly with his abilities? Somehow you had to reduce the ratios on his own abilities. Even his Q only has like, I think, a 65% scaling at best, which, you know, again, you don't really care about the damage scaling, but you mostly care about it for the evolutions, but like, it's still a relevant portion of Smolder's kit, and it means that overall the infinite scaling fantasy of Smolder does not exist in the same way that exists for other champions. Which then means that Smolder is building this entire Manamune Essence Reaver build for his Q and his Q alone, and this would be fine if his Q is a skill shot like Ezreal, but it's targeted, which has several implications. Firstly, this means Smolder can't spam damage from a safe distance like Ezreal or Corki can, which limits some of the power of that build, right? One of the reasons why it's powerful in Ezreal is because he has such a low cooldown skill shot that he can just throw out for reasonable amounts of damage at a range without ever having to actually commit to auto-attacking a target. Smolder can't do this. The ability's targeted, so you have to be in range of your auto-attack to use your Q, which means that you're just there to DPS. This then means that Smolder suffers from the same problem that Ezreal or Corki do when it comes time for them to actually DPS targets, in that they're not as good as other champions at doing this, right? A champion like Caitlyn or Vayne or Kog'Maw are very effective once a target gets within their auto-attack range because their whole point is machine gunning down targets, right? Face melting them with damage and not really caring so much about their abilities except as accessories to their damage output. Smolder, Ezreal, and Corki, meanwhile, are the kinds of champions that don't do very much DPS effectively, but mostly, the latter two at least, can spam damage safely, and that's the trade-off. Smolder doesn't get to do either one of these. He can't spam damage from safety, nor does he have particularly high DPS in the middle of a fight, in part because he doesn't have an attack speed steroid to help his DPS. Trying to maneuver a team fight with Smolder therefore feels super clunky and unsatisfying, especially because the Q might feel okay, but your regular auto attacks feel miserably weak as a result of this. Like, it almost feels like Smolder wants to build like Kog'Maw, where you're more focused on your auto attacks and you just use your abilities for their utility, but his utility abilities aren't great, and he just lacks that in-combat steroid that would really make that build work, and as a result, he just ends up in a spot where I just don't think the champion was designed for any build in particular. He just kind of sits there and does no damage outside of maybe every so often when he presses his Q. Smolder's non-Q abilities are also lackluster. The W looks promising with its large projectile size and good range, but it's just a little too slow to be effective, and even worse, it slows down at the end of its range, meaning that enemies who may have been clipped by it will just walk out of it more often than not. This can be a benefit on occasion. The lingering projectile can help zone off choke points, for example, but more often than not, it's just frustrating. Finally, E deals approximately 0 damage. Even keeping an enemy champion in range the whole time, you just don't actually do anything with your E's damage, which means that it's only there for a mobility spell, and you're never going to get that sort of extra burst of damage that you might have ordinarily gotten out of something like an Ezreal E. And as mentioned before, DPSing in a fight is super frustrating on Smolder. His low base attack speed, coupled with the Ezreal-like build that Riot intended for him, means he does shockingly little damage in between Qs, and his Q even has some frustrating moments. Being targeted means you have to be in range to use it, which can make for some annoying play patterns. Just in general, I think Smolder just is a very unsatisfying champion to build and to play right now. I like the potential that the champion has. He has some high moments, but I really feel like there are just so many rough patches that it interferes with my ability to enjoy the champion. I could be missing a lot when it comes to him, I will completely admit, but so far Smolder has felt completely irrelevant in every game that I've seen him played in. He's an infinite scaler that doesn't scale well, he's a DPS champion that has terrible DPS, and not enough utility to justify a pick if he falls behind. I really want Smolder to be good because he's a dragon and I like dragons and I want to play a dragon 80 carry, and maybe he will be in the future, but right now I'm not terribly impressed. You guys, though, will have to let me know what you think of him down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you've been building him in any particularly interesting way. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've been considering trying him out with, like, lethal tempo and going for, like, Essence Reaver into more attack speed type items, but let me know how you guys have been trying out Smolder and how you like him down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. and I'll talk to you all later.